Hi, this is Lisa from Question the Narrative. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope everything is great wherever you are in the world today. It is Wednesday, the 22nd of May, and I'm joined today by someone who's sort of helping me go into this next sort of advancement in direction, a wonderful lady called Stephanie Patel. And I heard her on some interviews as I was listening to people. As you all know, I'm very interested now in the near-death experiences, but more than just the near-death experience, it's what it gives you after and the openness and consciousness that it gives you to do that. So we wanted to explore a little bit of that today. So Stephanie, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
I'm really fine today, Lisa. I'm pretty good every day, but thank you very much for asking and for having me here to chat with you.
Oh, it's a real pleasure from this. So this is really good. So Stephanie, I started out by saying you have had a near-death experience, but that's not really the sort of the core of it. I know that these things sort of change us, and I think there's an interesting observation right now, as I've shared with the community here before, is that we're hearing a lot more about these near-death experiences. But there's a meaning behind them. And I'd love to understand if you feel that obviously you've had that experience, but so many others are having that experience. Do you get a sense that there's a reason why the universe right now is having people become more open to these experiences?
Yes, absolutely. It's a synchronicity. I mean, the way the universe is designed is to be in balance always and to be responsive to the human consciousness, I guess you could say. And so there's definitely synchronicity in it. That's all that I can say about it is that I see how the pieces are fitting together.
Hmm. And you see things very differently, as you now have come from that, which is very interesting. Were you,
Actually, Lisa, if I could correct you a minute, it was not the near death experiences were, I consider these experiences pit stops
mm,
along the way to remind you of where you're going and what you're doing. And for me,
yeah,
it was not so much the real change for me came when I was 28, and it was not a near death experience. It was what people call a spiritually transformative experience.
hmm,
But since then, everything has expanded in so many ways that I now see these as very small parts of a bigger picture. So it
yeah.
wasn't that they so much uh, changed who I was or how I saw things as that it's just much bigger. So I just wanted to say that
No, I think that's great. I think that's great. And what you just said, it reminds me of how what you were saying in your story that, you had a spiritual awakening at that point. And I think many people along the road have spiritual awakenings at very different times. I know that I was told by an astrologist once that said that, oh, you're entering into this cycle. And I had gone through a divorce and I've got, changed my life. I now live American living in Italy and everything changed. And I could tell you that in some ways it was as if that person who I was is no longer existing, and the person who I am is now coming in, but it was also foreseen in my chart. And I think that was also that kind of a spiritual awakening. And it changes you forever, profoundly. And you're right, it's a stop along the way, but it really is quite profound. And if we're open to it, it's the most wonderful experience because being that same person all the time just gives you one point of view. And as you
right.
expand, it's very interesting to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's really nice to kind of see what's going on right now. But I was also going to talk about the idea that right now we're going through these massive transitions in the world today. A lot of people are forcibly trying to stop the change because they don't want it to change. And many of us are very open to that. And I think most of the people who will hear this will be the people who are being very open to it. What do you see right now are sort of the biggest changes that are happening to humanity?
Oh wow.
Sorry.
Um, no, that's a great question, but it's very profound and very deep and very expansive because in my story, and I call it a story because that's what well, that's what we are. You know, you have your story. Everyone you talk to, everybody out there has a story,
Yeah.
and it's your story. It's come to you through your own peepers. so to speak. So everybody has a point of view. And we're all like the blind men around the elephant. If we don't share and if we don't talk to each other, we think the elephant is a rope because we have hold of the tail. So in order to sign it, sort of understand the big picture, we have to be willing to share from deep within what's going on with us. And we need to listen to other people. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the first thing I want to say.
Hmm.
So in my story, from through my peepers, I am deeply connected to those heaven side, and we talk every day for hours. And I put out a lot of videos about those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Lately, I've been having deep conversations with God, and I've been connected with God for my whole life. But also many other people, personalities, and so through especially the last is it 8.5 years, 8.5 years now, maybe nine, going on nine, since I connected with Steve Jobs and others in 2015, which was a certain other point in my story. uh, I have gotten a very big picture that goes back to the time when humanity was created on Earth historically, but
Mm-hmm.
also includes the spiritual dimension of perspective and the perspective from heaven and a perspective on these near death experiences. So it's a very big picture. So in my story, what has happened, boy, you'd really have to dig in deep to understand all of this. But what is happening
Okay, keep going.
is that a certain portion of humanity has matured to a certain point that um, they oh boy, the story is so long, to understand this, but a certain group have matured to a certain point where there's enough energy on Earth to actually create a separation. So if you want to be in heaven on Earth, so my story is about the reconnection of heaven and Earth
Mm.
and the bridge between. But if you want to really live in a world where people live in peace and harmony, if you want to go into that heavenly realm that you desire, where there's no war, if you have reached that point where you say, if everybody could understand this, there would be no war. If everybody just followed their heart, everything would work together in peace and harmony. You have to become the one that is harmless. You can't enter through those gates. Those gates will not open to you to enter into a world where people do not harm each other until you become harmless,
Mm.
because
Mm-hmm.
they don't
Mm-hmm.
need you in there spoiling the stew,
Yeah,
so to
makes
speak.
sense.
And all it means is that the rest of the people are still maturing. They're still growing to get there. And the people that are ready to enter through that gate are growing too. They're going to continue to grow, but they're just ready to be among people who think like them, so to speak, so that because what society does and has done for so long is it cuts those people who try to come through and with a message, it cuts them off at their knees. It
Mm-hmm.
says, you're too tall for us. You make us look small. We're going to cut you off at your knees so you look small like us. So there's a very big portion
Yeah.
of society that has become very polarized at this time. Very polarized. Because it is time in our story for the separation to happen. It's about climate change. It's not just about climate change, it's about earth changes, because the changes are not from the atmosphere only, but from within the earth,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because we have disturbed the energetic balance so deeply.
Hmm.
And so, as climate change happens, a large part of the human population is going to go away. They're going to go away because they don't trust on God. They don't believe in God. This is my story. This is how I
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah.
The religions, the people that in the religious who bring you into the church and tell you about good and evil, do not believe in God. They believe in control. And therefore, they have been controlling people for a long time. And people are very programmed from the time that they are born in this concept of good and evil, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads to hatred and despair and a lot of other problems. But they need to continue to mature. And so you will always reap what you sow. You will always receive what you give because of the cyclic nature of the spiritual and physical experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when you have an experience that you see through your peepers, you have a reaction, and you usually most people are reactive. Some people can be active, and they
Yeah.
can say, I'm not just going to be reactive to what's happening. I'm going to say, I know that I will receive what I give, so I'm going to give what I want to receive. We
Profound. Yes. Yes.
in
I've
our
been
group
experiencing
say,
it.
go ahead. I'm sorry. I don't
No,
know
no,
if
I'm
it
just saying
went.
that's actually a lesson that I've been experiencing in relationship quite a bit right now, feeling that. And I've heard that as a message coming in from spirit in a number of different ways. And I think it's a really important message of what you just said over there. You give what you want to receive.
And so if you say, what do I want to receive? I mean, people think they can manifest things by their thoughts, and you do manifest by your thoughts, but boy, you, look around you. Are you capable of running the world? If you're not, give it up. Give it up. And just say, God's got it in hand. I know it. One thing that near death experiencers, our message that they're bringing is that we are eternal beings. We are eternal. And that's a hard thing for people to accept, that you will never die. It is
This is
scary.
No, but that's actually, Stephanie, one of the most important things that I think is the message coming out of the reason that for the near-death experiences is that it goes against the doctrine of religion, which is that you die and you're either good or bad and you have whatever this is, but you don't die. I'm so glad that you've raised that again. It's so important. And that takes away fear. When you know that, that takes away fear because that's what everybody fears. If you don't do this, you could die. And I think that's fascinating.
I think, yeah. I mean, there's many different kinds of deaths, but I think that it does take away fear, not only for yourself, but for your loved ones.
Yeah, yeah.
If you can say that person's okay because they're an eternal being and, you know, they are going through a rough patch, but
Mhm,
it's okay because that's their story, that's their path, that's their lessons, and they are eternal beings just like everybody else.
mhm,
And God will
mhm.
welcome them home.
Yeah.
And then when they're ready, they'll come back and do it again.
Exactly. So I cut you off on your story. So you're saying that as going through fear, we're going through the separation, the earth separation, you want to continue on this.
Yeah, just through my peepers, those who turn to God. And when I say God, I'm not talking about anything, as we say, you can't take the wind and put it in a bottle. God is like the wind. You can't take the sunshine and put it in a bottle. You know these things by their effects. You know the wind when you see the leaves ruffle on the tree. So as you look at me speaking, you know the wind because this is the effect.
Mm-hmm.
And so the concept of God that we're talking about here, and I talk to God regularly. I have a conversation with God. This is the effect. But it doesn't mean I capture the wind and put it in a bottle and say, this is what God looks like. Everybody looks like my bottle.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, who do begin to understand this and begin to understand that they are eternal, that they restore their relationship with God, the wind, the sun, shine, that which you cannot see, you cannot fathom, you cannot put it in your bottle. But you have it, but it is eternally connected to you, then God will work with it. The rest will get their rapture and they'll go to heaven. They'll be raptured up to heaven and it's bye bye, and they'll
From this
rest in
experience,
heaven
then from this experience, right?
and they'll rest in heaven. And then when they come back, they'll have to be returned, probably. This is a story that I'm getting to the devastated places on earth where they will face starvation and all the crap that they denied that they were doing to the earth. In
Hmm.
other words,
Hmm.
The message here is that you will reincarnate and you're not going to get out free. You're not going to get out of this world free. You're not going to mess over this world, leave your timeshare trashed, and then you're out of it and you don't have to worry about it. Somebody else has to pick up after you. You will come back and inherit the mess you left.
Hmm.
This is the process of getting a new point of view and growth and coming to see that what you give, you will receive. So the easiest thing to give in our group is I love you. Because no matter what, I mean, we talk all of these things, but ultimately you just say, whoever you are, whatever you are, I love you.
Hmm.
And this is the universal glue
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm. Love
reality.
it. Very interesting. Okay, so you said a lot there. I want to try to sort of dissect a little bit more of that to get into a little bit deeper. But the big thing you talk about first is this time of separation. And what I find is interesting, I come from a semi-scientific background. I did research in healthcare and technology. But when I look at this concept of the scientific method, which we consider to be the gold standard, which none of our research, by the way, has met, but this spiritual stuff has, this concept of separation has come up from many, many different points of view. That's another concept that you were mentioning. So this concept of separation has been told by Dolores Cannon in her work, by the Law of One in their work, by many a spiritual being right now, and you're doing that. Can you tell me what, when you say this separation, is it a separation of dimensions, a separation of consciousness, a physical or a spiritual? I'd love to understand a little bit more about what you mean by separation.
Um, right now, what it means to me is that those people who choose to come to live in peace and harmony with one another, nobody, there's so many terms I could use here that will have little meaning for you without knowing the context.
Okay.
But the history of humanity is the idea of the golden idol, that, and it has an old history that everybody wants to be the one that everybody else bows down to. There's a lot of gods of the universe sitting in their armchairs in front of TVs, deciding who's going to heaven, who's going to hell, who's right, who's wrong, right?
Hmm.
When people come into peace and harmony, learn to live in peace and harmony, that is, be ready to go through the gates back into Eden. And Eden, by the way, the Garden of Eden is actually the Garden of Eating. It is the name that was given to the earth by those souls who had been uh, 300,000 years ago reincarnated in the new humanity. And we're so happy to be in this beautiful planet. It is the Garden of Eating, that all of your needs are supplied by the earth in
Huh.
a very abundant way.
Yeah, yeah.
And so those people are ready to go back into the Garden of Eating to be appreciative and understand the earth and the symbiotic relationship they have with the earth. Will also understand the symbiotic relationship they have with each other.
Hmm.
And so their thing is, my heart says to serve, to give, because I will receive what I give, and so I want to serve you.
Mm-hmm.
This
Mm-hmm.
is what we call the lesson of the loaves and the fishes, that if I give to you, you give to someone at all, everybody's taken care of. If you know the story of the people sitting around with the long spoons and they can't feed themselves, they have to feed each other.
Hmm.
So when people have reached that point, they become harmless. They're ready to return to the Garden of Eden. And so, we have a small group who are ready to begin an eco village in a place where we're directed by God and others, heaven side. And so it's up to everybody how they want to play. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
gets to play their own way. That's the way
Right.
we're
Their
playing.
story. Uh-huh.
But the problem is that I know many of my past lifetimes. And I know many of the past lifetimes of like Steve and many others. And I know how they have been cut off at the knees. I know how, well, the prime example is Jesus being crucified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And people will say things like, well, Jesus wouldn't talk. He talks all the time. So we have videos where he talks, the relationship
Mm-hmm.
I have with Jesus, because we have an old soul history. People
Mm-hmm.
say, well, Jesus would not talk about politics, maybe going a bit far here, but he didn't get crucified for walking around and saying, kumbaya. He was a threat to the powers that be, which was
Because politics.
mostly the Pharisees who
Yeah.
convinced the Romans,
Yeah.
but he obviously was outspoken about the way things were in his era. And it wasn't about politics, it was about coming back to God.
Yeah.
So John the Baptist got his head whacked off.
Mm.
Socrates had to drink poison. Gandhi got shot. Martin Luther King got shot over and over and over again. There's someone
Right.
out there who
Mhm.
becomes the one that wants to destroy the ones that are seeking peace
Yeah,
and
because
love
they
in
can't, it's
return.
non-controllable. They don't do that. But you're also just saying something very interesting there. You're talking about, you're going back to this whole idea about knowing your past lifetimes, and you said that was a problem in a way. So you know how you can end on that. But don't you feel like there are different energetic circumstances? So those around you in past lifetimes, and I know I'm not going to go back into whether time was different or where we were at time, because I know that's another whole interesting topic for discussion later. But you're talking about how you've seen how it's ended. Are people the same now as they were when you were in those other lifetimes? Will they have the same reaction?
Most will, and most do. I've been cut off at the knees a few times,
Hmm.
and I have people throwing tomatoes at me. Now I pick them up and throw them back. And I'm a better shot than they are. So I hit them in flat in the
Oh,
face, because I know what I'm talking about.
yeah.
But the separation question you asked me is for these people who have been trying to help humanity, and they've been hung and they have been shot and they have been killed over and over again, but still they come back into the world and try to lead humanity away from the idea of the golden idol and back to the idea of serving each other
Yeah.
and sharing.
Yeah.
And so my understanding is in my story that now it's time for those people to be able to live together, and for the other people, and they will start the new humanity. They will be the start of what will happen on earth after this, because the people
Hmm.
who are so angry still and so frustrated and so unwilling to face the devil inside themselves, in other words, there is no devil other than the one inside yourself, are the ones who will have to either, you can't stay in heaven, and I could explain why, but they are not the ones who will be able to live in the places on the earth that are preserved for the new communities.
Yeah.
The new communities are only open to those people, the ones that in our story that God tells me about. These are only open to the people who have gone through so much to grow
Hmm.
and are willing to grow and have come to the point where they are harmless, and they will then live together in these communities. They will become the kernel of the new humanity, because the old must be washed away. And
Yeah.
the old ways, the old religions, the Catholic Church was created for control. It was created to control the Christians.
Well,
And all
which
the
everybody had to
Christians,
convert to the Christians at that time in order so they can control them too. So let's not even.
no, they had to
Yeah.
convert to the Catholic, the Roman
Yeah.
Catholic Church. There were
Hmm.
Christians, and that Romans could not control the Christians because the Christians believed in life eternal. And so if they threw them to the
That no death
lions,
again. Exactly. Exactly.
and so the Romans had to get control of them, those pesky Christians. So how do you do that? You do a corporate takeover. You take it over, you set the rules, you decide how it works, and anybody that doesn't comply gets killed. And not only that killed, but you take enough of the core principles and you warp them to create this hell where people, you can't kill yourself even if you're a slave, because if you do, you'll go to hell.
Yeah, and this is fascinating because I told you before we started in that I'm an American and I moved to Italy. And I believe that there was a message in that. And the message I believe is that Americans, at my age, that I believed I was free in America, even though I know now that it was a bit of a fallacy, or at least it's a fallacy right now. But as I came here, I realized the major difference in the attitude of people. based on the control that the Vatican and this Catholic Church had on them. There was no freedom of thought, no freedom to do as you want, very limited ability to go out and just do as you choose to do, meaning that you had to work for somebody. The question, we talk about in America, this is as an example, what do you do for work? Not who do you work for. Here it's who do you work for? Who do you work for? And that is a very important distinction of control that you see. And the tax system is omnipresent about the taxation regulations and the inability to say, like, I can, in America, you can create a company. Here, it's like there's a lot of hurdles. And I just think that's really important what you're saying, the control. And people don't realize what that amount of control does to your psyche as you're raised in that control system. It's so important what you're saying right now. And I know that the universe said you must understand and experience that, to experience the difference and tell people the difference to help them out of that.
Very good.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. And there are so many things here, Lisa. There's so many things we could dive into.
No, this
It's
is
like
great, but we'll
it's
just
like
take
all
a
these
little
little
time.
doors open, and we could go through them and have a whole discussion. And so
Yeah.
that's what I mean. We have open the
Yeah.
idea of what's going on in the earth today is such a profound, huge subject that it's hard to zero down.
Well, this to me is the most exciting and the most interesting thing because I'm looking at it and I like what you said, the other term, observation. That's, as you get into the spiritual side of things, you realize that you're observing what you're experiencing. And if you can step back and observe why your emotional reaction and how you're doing all of these things, this is a very important thing. But I'm observing right now as we go through, and that concept that you mentioned about separation is really fascinating to me because you're right. I can see right now that I'm working toward creating new models for how to go. And every step of the way, there's the winds that are against you, those headwinds that make it difficult. But I've been like that all my life. And now it's more clear. It's like, I'll give an example of what I think are things that are headwinds that need to be changed. The patent system. And I've talked about this on my channel before, where it's very clear to me that the patent system was a way of controlling innovation, controlling, making certain that the controllers knew what was being invented, what people were creating. And if it was dangerous, we're going to pull it over there and make sure you don't do it. But if it was okay, we're going to put you into a system where we think you've done really good job, say, good job there, little mister, little miss. And we're going to give you a patent that you can pay for. And then you can pay for again by fees. And then you can prosecute. And then if it makes money, the big guys will take it. But that's okay. You'll still pay for it anyway. And you're like, this is fascinating. This is a fascinating system. So I've been working on different types of ways to put the patents, to have innovation come out there. And innovation, by putting it into a patent system, by definition of the patent system, you must disclose how to perform that art to someone who's well versed in the art. Essentially, I have to give it to you. And that's not exactly how you allow and give and serve humanity, is to give away something and not allow yourself to benefit and help to create more of it. And this was fascinating to me that people are fighting against it because they're like, I need to have the patent. The patent validates who we are. And that's how they trained us. There was just enough truth in that system. And nobody wants to change it right now. But I'm working on it. I'm working on it, Stephanie, or at least part of the people, because I know many other people are trying to do this as well. Does that make any sense to you?
But I see it as an effect of a deeper issue.
Tell me.
I
Yeah.
see what you bring up in the patent system is relevant in almost any system we have in the world today. And so I would say 99% of the people, maybe more, I would say probably even more, are really clueless about what I'm talking about. And I talk about it and people can understand certain points of it. But there are people, I always said, I could talk to 100 people and 99 would say, you're crazy. And one would say, where have you been?
I'm like, where have you been? I love it. I love it. But you're
And
right.
hopefully your audience is the 1%.
In general, I think people are looking for these things, and there's always a nugget of something. I mean, that's what we're here to do anyway. We're here to talk about it. So I'm just grateful to have that conversation with you. But it is interesting. You're right. It's a system of control to think that we have some kind of control of that. But, this whole idea here is that we are creating new systems because the old systems don't work. And you are seeing this frustration of people trying to hold on to the old system. And that's where I think there's just so much anguish and angst. And it's the money system and it's the control of the money system that has been amazing to me. That, I mean, I was a classical musician as an undergrad, Stephanie. I'll tell you a bit about my story.
Cool.
And then I got an MBA. And I thought, I went to a really good school. I have an MBA. I thought that was really great. I did all the reading, all the studying because I really liked it. And I studied economics and I thought this was great. And I came back and I end up working and I go and ask the question, why can't you write off debt? And they're like, well, you just can't. I'm like, well, interesting because you create money out of nothing, you print paper, and once again, why can't you just write off debt? And everybody looked at me like I was crazy. And I thought, okay, I must be the stupid one because, I was just a classical musician as an undergrad. What did I know? And I went through and I was indoctrinated that way. This is the most interesting piece of magic that they think they've done on us, the money magic.
Well, I don't know who they are. Actually, this is a question that always comes
Yeah.
up for me. Who is
Okay.
they?
Yeah.
Because I only know what I see through my own papers, and so I only know me. And when people talk about they, I'm like, what are their names? Who are they? So I know them when I see them, and I can say, hey, they.
Okay. Should we go there? Should we go? Do you want to talk about they or do you want to go the different direction? Because we don't have to go in that direction. I
Well,
mean, I have an
let's stop a
assumption of who
minute.
they. Yeah.
And what I would like to talk about is the near-death experiences because you brought that up. And
Okay.
I would like to talk about the perspective on that, why that's happening today, and
Yeah.
what I understand about it.
That'd be great. Okay. So tell me a little bit
Would that
about
be
that.
okay?
That would be fantastic. I find this an extremely interesting area. I really do.
All right. And so, as I understand it, the reason we have more near-death experiences today is because we have more ability, one, to resuscitate people, and two, to reach out to them. Don't minimize the effect of the digital revolution, the fact that you and I are talking from other sides of the world right now, and people
Hmm.
are going to be able to hear what we say. This is truly amazing. So these factors have come together to unfold another fact, which is that now people can hear about these things, unexpected results of the digital revolution, we could say. And so you could
Mm.
say, well, some things about it are bad because everybody's walking around like this. And some things of it have opened us up to a whole new reality. And so people jump on these NDE accounts. When I had my near death experience as a girl of 19 in 1970, I had no clue. I mean, I had an experience when I was 3, but I was told I could not talk about it. I was punished for talking about it.
Hmm.
And so when I was 20 or 19, I was not going to talk about it because I didn't want to be, I'd already been very programmed not to talk about it. But I did not have the perspective that people had today. Okay. I didn't know of other people that had had a similar experience. And so I didn't define it in the way that people define it today. But the near death experiences allows people to understand that God welcomes them home. Some people have hellish experiences, but they're soon over. And they say, well, God welcomed me home after that was over, They
Yes.
pulled me
Yeah.
out of hell. you know? And so their expectation, their guilt level was so high, they had to experience that. And so you go to heaven, and once you leave your body, your physical reality, as it were, you can experience anything you want. If you want to experience Jesus as the only Son of God who took away all your sins, you can. When Jesus comes and talks to me, he's an old friend and he's just a person. And that whole story was created to control people. And it
Mm-hmm.
hurt him. It hurt him badly that people were doing horrible things in his name. And so when I connect with Jesus, or when I reconnected with him, because it was like, how can I help you, you poor guy? What
Yeah,
can you
yeah.
give me?
It's a big
And I'm
burden.
the same with God. How can I help you? Look at this world. What can I do for you?
Yeah.
And that might be a difference between the way I see him and the way other people see him. So, there's a different comfort level there. But you can have anything you want in heaven. Now, the problem is, and I've had many experiences, I've done astral travel and all that. So I have been able to experience different things in this lifetime, as well as having a lot of knowledge about the past, which, of course, in the spiritual realm is not time and space are a duality that exists. They're like the container of the physical reality. And so when you're in heaven, you're kind of outside the container. And you can have anything you want. You can experience it as if it were very real. You will see what you want. If you want to be the queen of the ball, you'll be the queen of the ball, and your favorite musician will come and give you a hug and a kiss or whatever it is that works for you.
Mm-hmm.
Essential reality that you are eternal being, that God is real, that heaven is real, persist. So that essential understanding is true. However, what happens when you go to heaven is that the souls merge, if you will. That's why I have telepathy with those in heaven, but when you're in heaven, that's the given thing, is that everybody's telepathic. And the souls begin to merge. So these people who have near death experiences only experience the door, and then they come back, right, to talk about it. So it's like going through the door of Disneyland and you're going, wow, this is cool. But you haven't yet gone far enough to see the mechanism behind the rides, or that those smiling people
Okay.
greeting you have to go back in the lunchroom and say, oh, I'm so tired. So, what you come to see is that when you're in heaven, I call it the happy juice. You get fed the happy juice because you don't want to think about sad memories after a while. And so you just, and everybody's happy. And that's great. You're on vacation. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to come back. And here's why: because gradually the separation begins to diminish. So everybody has their colors. You've heard of auras. Everybody has their colors.
Mm-hmm.
When the colors begin, have you ever seen what happens when you whip together a bunch of colors? Turns a muddy brown.
Or black.
You
Yeah.
know, the light begins to go out in heaven, as they say. And so
Mm-hmm.
you have to go back to earth to get more color to bring back. Everybody has to take responsibility for this rotation. It is the way God designed it,
Mm-hmm.
because God is singular. God is the only singularity. But as you begin to merge back into God, it goes back into, eventually it would come to the white light, but it comes back into the inability to experience, because you have to have an experiencer and you have to have something to experience, and that is the physical reality. So you
Yes.
come back to earth, and in earth you get surprises. Like one of the surprises of the digital revolution, of those people working on it, was that now a lot of people can hear about near death experiences. That wasn't pre planned. So you get surprises, you get something new, you take that back to heaven with you, and then you digest it. We say you get fed on earth, you go to heaven, and you digest the food. When you go to heaven, if you hear people talk about it, well, yeah, I was in heaven and then I decided to go skiing because I love skiing. And there was this beautiful chalet, and there was this beautiful girl that came and skied with me, and on and on and on. But they're reflecting physical experiences, you see. Without that physical separation between you, the experiencer, and the experience, there cannot be a reality. It
Yeah.
just would fall back into nothing.
Into the
And
oneness.
so eventually you get the push, and God says, time for you to go, honey.
Mm-hmm,
No,
mm-hmm.
time for you to go back to earth. Where are you going to go? And nobody was, I won't say nobody, but almost nobody in heaven wants to come back to earth because they were so happy to leave. It was like, whoa, I was miserable there. I had to get up and go to work every day and, for a little bit of pay. And I'd complain about patents or this or that, or the way they're running the government and who they are. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to be here where I can innovate anything I want. But the only thing I can innovate is what I already know about, because you have to take the strands you have and put them together. You don't get the surprises
Yeah.
because you're in control in heaven
Mm-hmm.
of
Huh.
your reality. Because if you don't like it, you just say, I don't like that. And
Yeah.
boom, something else
Mm-hmm.
happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this cycle is a necessary part of the eternal soul. The eternal soul must go through this. And so you have, do you want me to stop for questions
No, no, no.
or
Keep,
thoughts?
this is really this. First of all, it's there are many things in here that I haven't understood and haven't heard before, and I like what you're going. Keep going, and I'll have a couple questions for you after we go this.
All right. So the reality, and this is going to sound very religious to people, but it's not. It is a reality. And the fact that religions pick up pieces of reality and then use them to make it, they may even, some people are even genuine about it,
Mm-hmm.
but some are very much into control. And so they can take that and then they warp it to fit their own agenda. The reality is that you, it could be me, it's you, it's every one of us. Imagine God like in the middle here, and there's a string from God to every person, like a wheel, an old wooden
Silver
wheel.
cord of life, right?
Yeah, you're tied to God energy.
Yeah, yeah.
You can think of it however you is, but God in the beginning, because God could not experience, God had to divide. He had to divide into the experience and the experiencer. So I say the answer is always love, because love is the reality, the ultimate reality. That's the singularity. There is no opposite to love.
Mm.
And then love had to divide into the lover and the beloved. So you and I are the lover and the beloved right now, because we're sharing an experience. I am a lover and beloved to my chair. The bee and the flower are the lover and the beloved, and it changes back and forth
Right, a
because there's always
dance.
the rotation between. And so, in order to split, there had to be three. There had to be love, God, there had to be the experiencer, and there had to be the experience. And how does God do that? Well, he does it by taking a
Right.
part of himself and putting it here and a part here, and they're inseparable. They are forever inseparable. So
Mm.
you, God, and reality are forever inseparable. And you can't separate yourself. You can never separate yourself from God, but you can turn your back to God. God will
Which,
still be connected to you, but you will be looking out into the darkness and
mm-hmm,
not to the
mm-hmm.
light.
Yeah.
When you turn back to
Mm.
God, things start to get straightened out. And so, since God has control of all the strings, it's God's job to balance out the universe and to balance out the demands of all his children. God, I'd like a new car today. God, I'd like to have $1 million in my bank account. God, would you please make my child well? On and on and on. And God's like, well, if I do this for you, what about this person? How will that affect them? you know? And
Yeah,
so it's
yeah,
really
all
about,
exactly. Yeah.
it's all about the balance in the universe. And I don't want to run the universe. I'm not here to run the
It's a
universe.
big job. It's a very big
It's a
job.
big job.
But let's go back to one thing you said that, you sort of glossed over it a little bit. You said, when you're up there, people don't want to go back to Earth. Talk about that a little bit, about how Earth is different from other places that you experience.
Well, we're just talking about heaven and earth. And I don't have all the answers by any means. This is my story, as seen through my peepers, 8.5 years of daily conversations with those heaven side,
Mm-hmm.
to try to understand it. But you're in heaven, which is the non-physical realm. And therefore, you can experience anything you want. Just like if you closed your eyes in your imagination, you can imagine something.
Mm-hmm.
But because there's no physical dimension, it just becomes your reality.
Mm-hmm.
You're just there. You
Yeah.
imagine playing with your dog, you're there.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing is that the souls on earth go to heaven. I guess all souls go to heaven, come back to heaven. However, well, I don't want to get too far afield. So ask your next
Okay.
question or tell me what you're thinking.
Okay, no, that's okay. No, because I think in general, Earth has always been considered a challenging school or a place to experience, evolve, and grow. But it's her time right now to transition and evolve, whereas in different places it evolve at different times. So I was just curious if there was anything in particular there. But let's go back. You were talking about the near-death
I
experience.
would like to talk to you about that a minute.
Okay.
So I know I've heard people say that their souls come from other planets and they incarnate on Earth, and I am told that is not true.
Okay.
That the beginning of humanity was almost 300,000 years ago. It was when the Anunnaki came to Earth and they created the hybrid DNA by using some of their own DNA to with the great ape family to create beasts of burden. There were attempts of individual strains where there were what you would call hominids that were attempting to get established on Earth, but their lines would peter out because
Mm-hmm.
if you're used to hanging from the trees and then suddenly you're running around on the grass, you can't necessarily outrun your predators. And so there was difficulty getting a line established that would be more evolved for that purpose. And the Anunnaki, although it was not their intention to do so, they just wanted beasts to help them mine the planet, created humanity. Some of the souls that now inhabit in humanity are from Nibiru, which was a planet that was destroyed by the people that lived on it. It was actually a planetary system that was destroyed. Some went into space, they came back, they are the chosen people. They actually named themselves the chosen people, so you can think who they are when they reincarnated into bodies on Earth, which they didn't want to do because to them they were just beasts. And the other group was a group that had worked together on Nibiru. This is my group, soul group, had worked together on Nibiru. So these are the old souls on Earth. This is, again, my story, what they tell me through my
Yeah.
peepers. And it all fits together, all the pieces fit together. And so these people from Nibiru had, when the planet was destroyed, they already trust the Romans,
Yeah.
but he on living in peace and harmony. But when the planet was destroyed, the soul group decided to stay together. So
Mm-hmm.
they reincarnated on a variety of planets in very, very difficult circumstances because maybe you had to be a salamander and they were used to being a biped with a very intelligent one, big brain. And so they had many difficult experiences. And so when they had the opportunity to reincarnate on Earth in the new humanoids, they did. And so that group held
Mm-hmm.
together and they became known as the Elohim. Um, and the other humans that were created at that time, they got some special dispensations for soul development so that they could move from the group soul of the ape into the individuated soul of humanoids, of the human. And this became the inception of humanity on Earth. And it complies with, the stories that I've been told, and they're very intricate, comply with the archaeological evidence that I research everything. I'm a lawyer. I was a lawyer for 30 years. I research everything they tell me. And it complies, although I never knew about this before they started telling me about it. And so the problems humanity has began at that time. So people who think that their souls come from other places and reincarnate on Earth at this time are actually working off old memories that surface and that maybe they can't. As a lawyer, one of the things I would always say is eyewitnesses are the best worst evidence ever because
Sorry, good evening.
they'll see a little piece of something and they'll write a whole story about it, and it
Mm-hmm.
will be just, and if you had a video of it, you would just laugh at the story they wrote about it because they
Mm,
only saw a little piece of something. And I have many examples of this, and there is
mm.
many psychological studies on this. So people have a little piece of experience and they put it together with a story. So Dolores Cannon created a whole story about this through her
Hold
work
on
with
one
people.
second. Okay, that's interesting. Keep going. Yeah. With
Okay, so
Dolores.
Dolores Cannon, and I read a lot of her books back in the day.
Yeah.
She created a whole storyline about this because she was getting bits and pieces from these people that were hypnotized. And they were getting bits and pieces from the fact that you're hypnotized or you go back into your past history and you see something doesn't change the fact that you still see it through your peepers. You're still going to see a piece of something and you're going to write a story about it.
Mm-hmm,
As God
mm-hmm.
explained to me the other day, let's say you could go back into a memory that you had 500 years ago and you see your body laying there and you go, oh my God, I'm dead. They killed me. And in reality, you either tripped or you playing dead because people are chasing you and they're chasing other people or something. So you didn't get the whole story,
Mm, yeah.
but you create a story. You've come to a conclusion. There, I died that day. And now
That's
you've got a
good.
conclusion. You bring that conclusion back with you. You got to fit it into all these other pieces. So you got to warp this one and this one a little bit to make it all fit together. And so that's what they tell me. I have no direct experience with anything like that, but they do tell me that it would be impossible because if your soul did not have the life experience on earth of other souls, you would be lost because your soul controls your story.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
you wouldn't be able to pick up language like you do. You wouldn't be able to understand the relationships between people the way you do. You wouldn't understand your body because it would be like
Too
suddenly being
new.
stuffed into a dog. It would
Mm.
be totally unfamiliar to you because your history, your soul history, everything you know derives from your experience in time and space, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, you keep going back to this one concept of it through my peepers, which I think is very, very interesting. And that's really, I guess, what you're articulating right over here, which is like everything is from a point of view. And as we shift around, we get these different points of view, and it's like becoming a three-dimensional or multi-dimensional object. Eventually, when you get multiple points of view, you might start to really understand something, which I think
Right.
is, yeah, really interesting how you're putting it down there. And
It's
and
like
to
that
me,
elephant and the blind people around the elephant. And
yeah,
that's why it's so important to talk to people and hear what they say and say, well, that doesn't make
yeah,
sense to me. Could you explain it another way so I
differently.
can try to understand it?
Yeah, yeah. And language to me, like the differences of languages, I've always felt like that is such a hardship because I'm listening to people translate and it's like it's not just understanding what they're saying, it's translating into words, but then understanding what those words are supposed to mean. It's a complex concept of what you're talking about. But this history of humanity that we have here, I've heard many parts of that, and then there are just elements that you talk about that are different. And I think that's important for us to know. So as much as the near-death experience that we started off the conversation with, I think is really critical and is a consequence of the digital age, also now the communication of our history is really a consequence of that digital age as well, which I think is really interesting and important. And that too is starting to surface in our consciousness, which means that we're supposed to understand that there's a value, there's an interesting opportunity for us to understand how we're here, what these genetics are, and what we're doing. And I'd love to do more of that. But we're at the hour, and I would love to do this. First of all, would you agree to doing another conversation? Because I think we could talk for many more hours about many different things. I would hope that we can continue because there's so much you can share if that would be okay with you.
Sure. I'm happy
Okay.
to discuss these things.
Yeah, I love this. But I was wondering, and you don't have to say yes, is there, because I think so many people are going through so much right now, and I know you channel, and I don't know who you like to bring in, but could you channel would you mind channeling something? And is there a message that you could bring to people today that could be
Yes, I don't,
full?
yeah, I don't mind doing that. I will say I don't call it channeling, I call it telepathy, and I will
Mhm.
explain how it works. In the past, when I would have conversations, I would maybe type them up or whatever. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
somebody clued me into, and sometimes I couldn't get words, especially the con words, conundrum, condom, oh,
Palindrome,
condiments. I
palindrome, yeah.
couldn't, I couldn't, I was having trouble. And somebody keyed me into years ago, about, I don't know, number of years ago, and it took me a while to do it. But I started using a little cheap pendulum, plastic. I think I got a whole box of these for $8.99 at Hobby Lobby or something, some dental floss,
Yeah.
and a cheap letterboard. And I used this, and it became very, very convenient. And I now use it not exclusively when I'm having private conversations away. I don't, but uh, it allows them to spell out words. I don't have to think. I don't have to be there. And so what happens, what I learned to do to facilitate this, because I've written many books with them, I translated, put their books out, is that I will say aloud what I have to say. They will say aloud what they have to say. And I'll just ask who's there. I can ask for somebody, but usually it's just who's ever's there. There's always somebody there. And so they know when I pick up the pendulum that it's time and everybody comes running.
I
So,
love that. I love that. Oh, that's really interesting. I love that. It would be
and
wonderful. Whoever you think comes in, whatever message that could be beneficial in the highest good of everybody here.
all right, well, we'll see who has something to say because I never know. Steve is here because you mentioned me and I wanted to be here. And I
Yay.
want to ask you what you would like to know of me.
Hmm. I'd like to know what he thinks about what his creation of Apple is doing for humanity now and what he would like to have it done for humanity.
Boy, that's a big topic. You have a way of asking big questions. So I want to say, first of all, that I was driven to do what I was doing on Earth. I just knew I had to do it. And so I did it. And there's a big story behind this because all the pieces connect. So all I can say is I was driven. I did what I needed to do, and then I left, period.
Okay.
As to the effect that it has on humanity, I don't really care
Okay.
because the truth is that I am already in process of reincarnation and I have left my prior identity pretty much behind. And
Mm.
I am now working on my new identity.
Oh, this is very good. Mm. I love that. Terrific. Thank you. Um, let's just see
And
what
it
else.
doesn't have to be Steve. Steve, it doesn't have to be you, right?
Mhm.
Yes,
Okay.
it has to be me, Steve. No, I'm just kidding. It doesn't have to be me.
Thank you. Um, I'd really like to know how we can be helpful to the most number of souls as we go through this transition. And what I mean is sometimes helping is actually not doing it for them. But what is the best thing that we could be doing for each other as we go through this transition?
Best thing you can do is say, I'm here. How can I serve you? It's the best thing you can do. Look somebody in the face and say, I'm here with you. How can I serve you? And if they say, well, why don't you channel somebody today? We say, okay. And if they say, could you make me a blueberry pie? We say, well, I don't really like making blueberry pies, but I can sing you a song. Could I sing you a song? What I'm trying to say is that the best thing you can do to help anyone is to meet them where they are and to say, I am here. Where are you? And if they say, well, for example, I don't want to listen to you because you just talk trash, then you say, thank you for helping me understand you. Now I'll go away and you can go away and be with your own people and I'll be with mine. You
Mhm.
see? So the idea that you have the power to help others is so arrogant.
Mm.
I'm just going to say it right here.
No, that's
that
good.
it is so arrogant to think that you alone have the ability to help other people come home when you're not even home yourself. How do you know you're not home? Because if you were home, you wouldn't worry about it.
This is
You
very
would
true.
just say,
Wow.
I'm
Wow.
here today. I love you. What can I do for you?
That's beautiful. Okay. One last thing. Is there, should we be concerned about AI as being negative, or is AI actually a real opportunity to help us have an easier life?
Well, in our group, we don't use the words negative and positive in a sense of good and bad. We say that if you're going to LA and you're where Steph is and you head east, you're going in a negative direction, dear. You might want to turn around. And so you might say that negative and positive always have to be balanced because you still have the choice to go east or west or south or north, you see. So, what do I think of AI? Again, I don't care because it's going to go away. Because you can ask the Anunnaki how they felt about AI, because they were the ones who created humanity in order to escape their false reality that they created through their powerful technology. And they were miserable, you see. They were some of the most miserable souls you ever did see because they cloned themselves and they were able to figure out a way to shift their consciousness into the same point of view. And that was misery. You cannot use AI to defeat God. You cannot use AI to defeat nature. And so, what you have to understand is that you defeated yourself the minute you turn to AI to resolve a problem instead of turning to God,
Mm,
because God is the ultimate in intelligence, you see. And so just ask God, say, God, what would you like me to do today? And if God says, well, I'd like you to create an iPhone, then do it. But you're not relying on AI. You're just relying on God, you see. And
mhm,
if you ask God and you say, God, what should I do today? Because I want to figure out how to build this bridge. And it's a lot easier if I use all this computer business and stuff and create a facsimile of the project so I can look at it and see how it'll work. And God says, okay, but beware, my son, because eventually those bridges are going to come tumbling down. And
mhm,
when they do hit the ground, you better run because you are affecting my world, you see. You are
mm,
affecting the earth by everything you do. And if you think that you are so mighty, that you can be so flighty as to think that you can get away with changing the lay of the land, with damming up my rivers, and with cutting down my trees, and extracting all my minerals, and leaving nothing for your children
mm, mhm,
to inherit, then you will learn that you are the child who will inherit it because you will be reincarnated into the world that you destroyed through your arrogance. So don't destroy yourself through the arrogance of AI. Just say, God, is this reasonable to suppose that I could do this and turn this task over to this particular program? Or say, God, look around. It used to be that people would paint a picture and everyone would go, wow, nice picture.
mhm,
Now everybody looks at a picture when somebody shows it to them on the internet and says, wow, nice AI. Because
mhm.
nobody can trust anymore on each other. They
Mm,
can't trust if you're real or if you're a lie.
mhm,
And they have even created supposed conversations with me with AI. And I say, well, what about me? What about me? I'm real, you see, and I can talk to you. But if
yeah,
you'd rather talk to a robotic version of me, go ahead. because the people like you who are willing to talk to me are few. They
Mm.
are very few. And Steph had to go through a few because she would do what I asked her to. And she would try to connect with people for me and say, "Hey, Steve is here. Steve wants to talk to you." And they would ignore her and probably put her in the crazy bin if they could. And so the very people who needed to hear from me the most did not get to hear my voice through Steph that would say, "I'm still alive today. I'm still alive today, and I have learned some things since I got to heaven, and I'd like to share them with you." And so be careful, people, of yourself. Take good care of yourself, in other words, because you're worth taking care of.
Mm.
Don't give away your sovereignty to your spaceship, you see, which is what happened to the Anunnaki. They gave their sovereignty away to their spaceship because they had to become the slaves of their spaceship because their spaceship needed to survive in order for the Anunnaki to survive. And so the Anunnaki had to do exactly what their spaceship told them to. And that is no way to live. Like you say, Lisa, do you want to live in a world where people say, "Who's your master?" Or would you rather live in a world where people say, "What do you want to do today?"
Yeah.
Thank you for asking me these questions. And I'd love to talk to you again.
Oh, thank you. Wow, that was profound. Really, really profound. That was great.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
mean, it's not me, it's him. I
No,
just
as I
get out
meant
of the
just
way.
about what he was saying. Yeah, that no, it's really those are important things to hear. Very interesting about the Anunnaki and how they were driven by their technology, driven to extinction in a way by their technology.
Yeah, they're
And
still out there. So, but they don't hang around the earth, is my understanding. But they're still out there. Just some of them got blown away and ended up having to reincarnate on Earth because they were just reincarnating into their clone bodies.
it seems a little bit too reminiscent about where we are today. There's
It
just a
is.
lot. That's why I think I find history the most important thing to understand is to understand what it is that we should have learned before because it's always been held back. It's been held back from us, which is very interesting to me. Very important. Wow. Very interesting. Well,
It is. Part of
Stephanie,
the pieces that are coming together, Lisa, if I can say this,
yeah,
are
please.
this whole story because if people understood how the Nibiru was destroyed by its own inhabitants, how Mars was destroyed inadvertently through its own, we call it the arrogance of
Hubris.
technology
Yeah.
of the Martians who lived there at that time,
Hmm.
small group, and how Atlantis was destroyed by technology, um, and the lack of trust on the heart and on God. Um, we have created that situation on Earth today. And if you don't learn from history, if you
Right.
can't understand that you were there in those days, or some of you were, it, we're
Yeah.
on the brink of repeating it. And that's why
Absolutely.
all these things are happening and coming together today because God says, time's up, people.
Yeah.
You're going to have to grow or be destroyed completely.
Well, I mean, exactly every one of those civilizations you talked about had the same thing. It was butting up against their technology. And we saw that in World War II, where you brought the technology back in. And that's, what we're talking about here, and going away from what our heart says and connecting in with spirit on that. That's a really, really important pattern for us to see. Wow. I'm gonna have to think about that a little bit more. I love that. Well, Stephanie, thank you very much. Is there any last point that you'd like to make before we close for this evening?
Any of you guys, I usually turn it over to them. God's here. And I love my dear because she always is so clear when she allows me to talk through her because she doesn't care what I say. She just says, "Say whatever you want to say. because it's not up to me today, because this is the way Steph does play, because she gave away her trust on being the one who had to be the golden idol. You see, she doesn't care if people pay attention to her or not, because if she did, then she'd have to worry about giving them what they want. And therefore, she would filter what I say. And so she just lets it play. And she says, I don't really care, God, because I'm happy. I'm happy in my little apartment right now. I have a home, but I live in a little apartment and I'm happy and I don't want to cause anybody any grief. So I just enjoy my day. And I say, the best thing that I can tell you, Lisa, and the ones who follow you, is that I love you.
Now that's beautiful. That's really beautiful. I love that. Well, I love you too. And I've heard you my whole life too. So thank you. Wonderful.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah, so beautiful. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for agreeing to this and for, I hope this is one of our first conversations and we get to speak more frequently. And thank you for sharing and for the learning and for, I feel it in the heart. So wonderful than that. This is Lisa from Question the Narrative, and I wish everybody a wonderful day.